In this module, I just want to go over some of the common terms you'll hear bantered about as you're starting your journey selling on Amazon. These are terms you'll hear throughout the course, terms you'll hear people reference on Facebook groups. Wherever you go, you may read them in different articles or blog posts. I just want to give you a basic understanding of what these terms are. Now, if you look down in the notes for this module, you'll actually see them explained. So you don't need to memorize them all right now and worry about you got every little detail, but I just want to quickly go over, there's quite a few of them, so we'll go through them really fast. But look down in the notes for more details on each one of these terms. We're going to go through them in alphabetical order. So the first term is a 3PL, the number 3 and then PL. This stands for a third-party logistics. This is a company that will help you organize all the shipping and logistics of your merchandise into Amazon or anywhere else, for that matter, that you want it to go. It's a little bit different than a freight forwarder, which we'll talk about later. Sometimes they're one and the same, but a 3PL typically is like a warehouse. It's like a big warehouse, usually here like in the United States, that will receive your goods from overseas or from your manufacturer. They will store them for you. As you need to ship them out, they will ship them out to Amazon or to other retail locations or other channels that you may be selling in. They handle that part of it. So it's the storing and then the individual shipping out of them to their final destination. But they typically don't actually get it to that warehouse. That's a freight forwarder, which we'll talk about in just a second, that actually gets it to the warehouse. 3PLs also can actually do individual shipping for you. So sometimes if you're doing FBM or you have your own website, not only will they ship in large quantities like palletfuls or large boxes or case boxes to Amazon, they can also ship 1 or 2 items at a time to individual customers if you need something like that. Another term is Alibaba. Alibaba is probably the world's largest sourcing website. But the thing about Alibaba is only about 10% of the manufacturers in the world are actually listed on Alibaba. It's a pay to be listed service, so all the companies that are on there are paying some sort of fee to actually be listed on Alibaba. But it's like the go-to default source for anybody that's looking to see where can they get something manufactured and for how much. And Alibaba it's a heavily Chinese-based manufacturing, but it also has companies from all over the world. There's some other websites as well that we'll talk about in the sourcing module, but Alibaba is the most common one that you'll hear. You also hear about AliExpress. AliExpress is the smaller quantity version of Alibaba. So it's more of a public-facing. Alibaba is more of a wholesale large quantity orders by 500 or 1,000 or 10,000 units. AliExpress is if you want 1 or 2, 5 or something. You don't need the big, huge volume. So you pay a little bit higher price, and there's a little bit less selection, but AliExpress is for the smaller quantity stuff, and that's what a lot of the drop shippers use. Some retail stores in the U.S. that's like bead stores, for example, that sell beads for arts and crafts. A lot of them independent, they get their stuff from AliExpress. So both of those they're Chinese-based companies that help in the sourcing. Next one is ASIN, A-S-I-N. That's Amazon's basically identifier that they use to actually identify all their products. So it usually starts with a B and then has a series of numbers and letters after that. Some of them start with a number, usually like books and media type of products might start with a number, but almost all ASINs start with a B. And that's basically the unique code for anything on Amazon. So you'll hear someone say, hey, my ASIN, that means their product. Or you'll hear someone say this ASIN did this or this ASIN did that. That's an individual product on Amazon. It's the number that Amazon assigns. You don't assign it, Amazon assigns it to identify that product. It'll always show up in almost all the URLs up at the top. You'll see it listed in there. It's the most common thing you'll see on Amazon for identifying a product from Amazon's point of view. You'll hear people sometimes talk about what's called the back end. The back end is what the public doesn't see. So you have a tool called Seller Central, which is where you enter all your data for all your products. You can see all your sales. You can download reports. You can get a whole variety of information on how your account's doing. That's called the back end. So as a seller, you can go log into the back end and you can actually see a lot of additional data that the public doesn't see. And so that's what the back end basically means, Seller Central, and all the additional data and reporting area that other people don't see. Next term you need to know is brand gating. Brand gating means that your listing, your ASIN on Amazon, is actually protected against other people selling it. This is very difficult to do, and most people can't get this, but big brands like Nike or or Adidas or Apple, they don't want just anybody coming on and selling Apple products or Adidas products. So what Amazon does is they restrict that listing, so you have to be authorized to actually sell the product. And so you have to go through a process where the brand owner, like in this case if it's Apple, they give you specific permission that yes, you are an authorized dealer of our products, you're official, they give the permission to Amazon, and then you can sell on it. It's to keep all the counterfeiters away, to keep people from just doing arbitrage on those products. So you'll see a lot of the big brands are brand gated. It's difficult to get, so as a new seller, you won't be able to get that. But over time, hopefully you'll develop into a big brand and can. Next term is BSR. That stands for best seller rank. And that will tell you how well you're selling within a category and a subcategory. So you could be, let's say, if you're in the main category of sports and outdoors, you may have a BSR of, say, like 100. That means of all the products that are in sports and outdoors, you're the 100th best seller, no matter what category they're in, whether it's a tennis racket or a pair of socks. The completely unrelated products that are in the same category, you're the 100th best seller. And then you'll have another ranking that will be a category ranking. So within, you may be a 100 BSR in sports and outdoors, and then maybe in tennis equipment, which will be a subcategory of sports and outdoors, maybe you're number 2. So those are rankings that tell you how well you're selling, and these are dynamic. It changes constantly. It changes by the hour, actually, on Amazon. But it's a really cool tool that you can use, and then a lot of the software tools use to see how well something's been selling, how consistent it is, how it relates to other products in the category, and it gives you a pretty good idea of not only the sales volume, but of how the longevity of products as well. The next term is what's called a child. You'll hear some people talk about child. It often is in conjunction with something called a parent. And a child basically is just a variation on Amazon. And a parent is the master. So you have the parent as the master, and then children are the variations. So for example, maybe you have a backpack, let's say. The backpack would be the parent. And so it'll have an ASIN, which is the unique identifier from Amazon, as the parent. But you really can't buy the parent. Customers can't buy that particular ASIN. They can't buy the parent. But under the parent are a bunch of children. And under the children might be the different sizes of backpacks or the different colors of backpacks. And so each one of those will have its own ASIN. So the parent basically is like a dead ASIN. It's just a placeholder ASIN. But people are actually buying the child's. So when you have sizes or colors, you're going to have what's called a parent, which is the master holder. And then underneath it, you have all the children for the variations. Next one is you'll hear talked about are containers. Containers are the big metal boxes that stuff is shipped on, usually by ship. Sometimes they're by airplane, but usually by ship. So the big ships that go across the sea that are stacked to the gills with these things, these big metal boxes, those are containers. Usually it's either a 20-foot or a 40-foot. There's also what's called a 40-foot HQ, which is a little bit taller. But most stuff is either shipped in a 20-foot or a 40-foot long container. And these containers, usually the stuff is not palletized in them. Sometimes it is, but usually it's just stacked floor to ceiling in these containers. And that's a lot of times when you talk to your factories, you can ask how many fit in a container. And they may say, well, 270 of these fit in a container, or 5,600 fit in a container. It's the most efficient way to ship. So if you're shipping smaller quantities, oftentimes you'll have to share a container with somebody else, and everything gets consolidated when it's shipped. So it's always best if the containers are your own product whenever possible, so that everything in there is yours, and it just expedites the process of getting it to you and minimizes problems. The next term that you need to know is CTR, and this stands for click-through rate. Click-through rate is how often is a determinant of how popular your ad is or your listing is. And so for every time it's shown, if your listing is shown 1,000 times and only 100 people click on it, that's a 10% click-through rate. So basically 10% of the people that saw it or were exposed to it actually clicked on it. So the higher that number, the better. Low click-through rates can negatively affect you on Amazon in the advertising and in where you are listed on the page. And there's some ways to control that we'll talk about later. Next term is disposal. Disposal is when you have extra inventory at Amazon that you need to get rid of. Maybe you have overstocked, you bought too much, you need to get rid of some. maybe it's slow moving, maybe some of it is damaged or something. So that's where disposal comes in. Usually on Amazon, what they allow you to do is if they're storing this in their warehouse and you want to get rid of some, you can actually ship it back to yourself or to any destination. In the past, we've donated stuff and just put in an address of the charity, and then the Amazon will ship it to them for a fee. It ranges from 30 to 60 cents. It depends on the product. They're changing that actually as we speak right now to a little bit different structure, but that fee will apply. It's pretty reasonable, and they'll ship it out. Otherwise, you can tell Amazon to discard it, and they'll basically, it's not really throwing it away. I mean, some items, if it's a perishable, they may throw it away, but if it's another type of item, they put it on these big pallets, and then these liquidation companies come and buy them and resell them to other people who make it a business to go through Amazon returns and actually see which ones are still in good shape and they can sell and which ones aren't. It's a whole nother business model. But or you can donate it to a charity. Amazon has a new option now where you can donate to a charity. So that's what disposal means, is get stuff out of the Amazon warehouse. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about something called EXW. That stands for Ex Works. That basically is a shipping term from your factory. That means that you pay for all the cost from the factory's door to wherever you're shipping it to. You take all the insurance risk, all the liability, and you pay all the cost. So if your factory is in Shenzhen in China and they say this product is we're selling it to you for $5 EXW, that means it's $5 from their door. And so all the additional costs to get it to the ship in the port, to get it to wherever the final destination is, all the insurance on that's all on you. So it's as soon as it leaves their door, their hands are clean and they're not responsible anymore. Compare that to FOB. FOB stands for free on board. And so if you see something, if the factory's in Shenzhen and it says FOB Los Angeles, that means the factory will take care of everything, all the insurance, all the shipping, everything to get it to Los Angeles. Wherever the city is, or the port, after FOB, they're responsible for it to that point. And then after that, you're responsible for it. Sometimes you'll see stuff called DDP. And DDP basically means it's duty and freight paid. So it's basically everything is taken care of. And that's where FedEx and UPS a lot of times will use DDP. It's only good up to about $2,500 of value, so it's not good for higher value stuff. But you still may have to pay a small little bit of taxes, but pretty much everything is taken care of for you if it's DDP. But FOB, a lot of times you'll see it FOB the port. So if it's actually in Shenzhen, Shenzhen actually has a port, so it'd be FOB Shenzhen. And then Amazon, not Amazon, the factory would be responsible for getting it to the port, and then from there it's your responsibility. Next one is feedback. Feedback is something that you can have on Amazon from your customers. There's two types of feedback. One are reviews, what your customers leave about your products, and then you have another section called seller feedback, where customers can leave reviews about you as a seller, whether you shipped on time, whether it was packaged well, those kinds of things are on seller feedback. You want to try to make sure that's at least a 98% or higher rating. If it goes lower than that, that can affect your rate rankings on Amazon and affect another bunch of other key metrics. The other type of feedback are reviews. The reviews are what the customers leave after they've experienced your product. Hopefully those are good. You really want to strive to maintain at least a 4.0 or higher review rating. Anything below that's going to significantly adverse your sales. So you do everything you can to make sure your product is good and you take care of the customers so that review rating doesn't dip below 4.0. The next term is FNSKU or FNSKU. This is a unique identifier that Amazon gives you. So they have the ASIN, which is the identifier for on the Amazon site. But then to identify the actual product itself, they have what's called an FNSKU. And this is, you can choose this if you have a numbering system that you want to go by, or Amazon will assign it for you. And this FNSKU is a very important number on Amazon that basically controls almost the entire listing and the process of your product. The reason you'd want to have an FNSKU is sometimes products are commingled. So if you're your own private label seller, you're probably not going to have this issue as much. But if you're selling, Crest toothpaste, for example, and you're shipping in your toothpaste, and so is 10 other people shipping in their toothpaste. You don't want, if one of the other guys shipped in a bunch of toothpaste that had leaky bottles, you don't want to get blamed for that, because if it all gets commingled and mixed together, Amazon doesn't know whose is whose. But by having an FNSKU, they can say these 20 bottles belong to Kevin, these 18 bottles belong to Johnny, and so on. They know exactly whose product is whose, even though the product is identical. So that's an FNSKU. And the next one you want to know is a freight forwarder. A freight forwarder is a person that actually takes care of all the shipping logistics of your product from the factory to its final destination. So these people, and there's a one here in the course called Unit Cargo, and they go into detail about a whole bunch of stuff on shipping. But a freight forwarder will actually, you can call them up and they'll handle everything for you. So it's kind of hands off. You say, look, I got 1,000 of my items ready at the factory in Shenzhen. Here's the address. Here's what they are. Go get them. And then the freight forwarder will organize the whole shipments. They'll organize the ship it goes on. They'll organize all the paperwork. They'll come back and they'll tell you, these are the taxes you're going to have to pay. This is what it's going to cost you to ship it. And they'll babysit it all the way to its final destination, which a lot of times might be Los Angeles if you're selling in the U.S., or maybe your warehouse in Texas or wherever it is. They'll babysit it all the way there and make sure it gets to you. That's what a freight forwarder does. A hijacker is another term you'll hear quite a bit. A hijacker is someone that a lot of times they could be a counterfeit person. They could be someone that maybe you didn't differentiate your product very well, and they are basically imitating you, but they are someone that takes advantage of your listing. So you've done all this hard work and you've created all these beautiful pictures and the right keywords and done everything we teach you in the Freedom Ticket course, put your product up on Amazon, you're happy, you start to sell, and then all of a sudden there's somebody else there where it says, also available from these sellers. And you're like, what the heck? Sometimes that might be Amazon, and that's okay if it's Amazon, because that's not a hijacker. That's Amazon selling things they damaged or your returns, because sometimes Amazon will damage items and then they'll pay you for it, and then they'll just resell it as like open box or damaged box or something like that. But if it's another third-party company that's selling it, and you didn't give them permission to sell it, and they're selling basically the same thing, that's called a hijacker. In some cases, it's identical to what you're selling. In other cases, it's someone kind of riding your coattails, and maybe their product actually is a little bit different. And if that's the case, there's a process where you can actually try to get them removed if you're brand registered. But those are that's what a hijacker is someone that's taking advantage of all your hard work and without your permission. And you'll see that term used sometimes when it's really not a hijacker, but it actually is. And brand registered is another term you need to know. We'll talk about this in another module, but that means basically that Amazon has recognized you as a brand. They've actually said that, hey, you have a trademark, you have a little bit of protection. We're going to give you a few more benefits on Amazon, some additional reporting tools, some additional features, some additional ability to take a hijacker off. And we'll talk about that in detail, how to get brand registered and all the advantages of that in a later module. Next term you need to know are keywords or search terms. Keywords are what are relevant to your product. So that's what you decided that, hey, this is what best describes my product. Search terms are what users actually type into the search bar to find products. So sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're slightly different. But search terms are what a user types in. Keywords are how you're describing your product. And that could be in your listing, could be in what's called your backend and your search term fields, could be in your descriptions. That's what keywords are. The next one that you need to know is landed cost. Landed cost is the total price to get something to Amazon. So maybe your factory says the price is $5 for this item. Well, that's $5, and that's what a lot of people will say. Well, my profit margins, I'm selling it for 20. I have this profit margin. They only use that cost of the factory. But no, that's not the final cost. You have the cost of the shipping to get it to the port, the shipping on the ship or the airplane or however you're bringing it. You have duties and taxes that are often imposed in the U.S. Maybe you have some additional clearance fees and brokerage fees that you have to pay. So your landed cost on a $5 item sometimes can double, depending on what you're selling. Sometimes the tariffs can be as high as 25%, and a duty can be another 15%. So it depends on what you're selling and what it is. So the landed cost is the final price once it reaches the Amazon warehouse, including everything along the way, everything along the way. The next one is a listing. A listing is your page on Amazon. That's what's composed of your title, your price, your pictures, your short descriptions called bullet points, and your long description, and then what's called A+ content, which is a big detailed kind of brochure and more pictures at the bottom of the page, as well as your video content. That's your listing. Your listing is basically your brochure on Amazon. Next one is LTL. LTL stands for less than truckload or less than load. So that's basically pallets. So when you're not filling out one of those big containers, you don't have enough product to fill up a 20-foot or 40-foot container, you can do what's called LTL. And LTL means less than truckload. So it's typically means stuff stacked on pallets. MAP is minimum advertised price. So you can actually designate a price that this price should not, my product should not be sold below a certain price. That's called MAP. A lot of times you'll see that where it says click here to see price. And you have to click to see the price. Just means that person's probably selling it below the MAP because they're not allowed to advertise that. Next one is MOQ. MOQ stands for minimum order quantity. This is when you contact the factory, they'll say this is the lowest amount you can order. We don't do orders under 500 units. You got to order at least 500. These are negotiable. Sometimes they'll tell you it's 5,000, but they'll really do 1,000. But MOQ just gives you an idea, like this is the minimum amount I have to order in order to get this certain price. MSRP is your manufacturer's suggested retail price. That's the price that you're suggesting something be sold at. So maybe your MSRP is $89.95, but on Amazon you're going to sell it at $69.95. So you can get it where it scratches out and says MSRP $89.95. That's what we recommend, but we're selling for $69.95, so it kind of looks like a sale on Amazon. That's what MSRP is the suggested price for it. Doesn't mean you have to sell it at that price, but that's the suggested price. Multi-channel fulfillment is where you're having something fulfilled through multiple channels. Maybe you're selling on Amazon and you're selling on Walmart, you're selling on your own Shopify site. It's where you can actually have items fulfilled by one central place. One central warehouse could be a 3PL. In some cases, Amazon will actually ship your Shopify, your own store orders. They used to ship Walmart orders. They may actually start doing that again soon. But Walmart doesn't like that, actually, when they do that, because it comes with a little smile on the box, and Walmart doesn't appreciate that. But that's what multi-channel fulfillment is handling fulfillment from different online marketplaces. A prep center is someone that actually prepares your product. So maybe when a lot of times this is done in China. It could also be done in the U.S. Sometimes a 3PL will do this for you, or sometimes it's a separate center. But that's when you need to bundle things together. Maybe you're selling a toothbrush and a comb, and they got to put the two together and put them in a poly bag. Sometimes a prep center, they'll put the labels on for you, or they'll fix problems of your product or check your product. That's a prep center. They're getting it ready to go into Amazon. Prime basically is Amazon's program that allows people to get things in 1 or 2 days with free shipping in most places in the U.S. And it also gives them some other benefits like video channels and some other advantages. But Prime basically means fast free shipping on Amazon. Profit margin and contribution margin are two different things. Profit margin is the final number after all expenses, after all costs of labor, overhead, shipping, your office supplies, everything. Is whatever's left over is your actual profit. What the contribution margin is a different term. It doesn't include all those variable costs. Contribution margin usually means your selling price minus your landed cost, sometimes minus a few other things in there, but it's not the full picture. So make sure profit margin and contribution margin are two different things. ROI is return on investment. So return on investment is how much do you put in and how much do you get back. The higher the better. It's an indicator of how fast your money is working and turning. So you can have a profitable product that makes a good profit, but it could have a low ROI. That means that it's taken a long time to sell. And so you want to find products that have both a high profit and a good ROI. Those are the magic products that you want to sell. The next term that you want to know is a removal order. A removal order is something on Amazon where you can actually have items removed. Maybe something is damaged, or maybe you got too much items in Amazon. You're like, I need to ship some of these back to me or to my 3PL. I'm going to repackage them, or I'm going to do something with them where I need to get rid of them or change them up in some way. That you can do what's called a removal order. where items are shipped back to you or some place that you designate for whatever reason that you need to take care of those. Usually it's an issue of you need to check the products and fix a problem that Amazon's reported to you. The next item you need to know is restricted. Some items on Amazon are not allowed to be sold. They require certain approval, so there's restricted items like hazardous goods, for example. Some categories have restricted items. Some medical things require FDA approval to actually sell, so those could be restricted items. SKU stands for stock keeping unit. That's a very important item, very important field on Amazon. You can either assign it yourself, so if you have multiple products, you can assign your own numbering system, or Amazon will assign it for you. That's the key determining factor that controls all your reviews and your listing. So you always want to make sure you note whatever your SKU is, whether you pick it or Amazon, because if you ever have to recreate your listing and you want to maintain your reviews or some of your sales history or your inventory, everything is tied to that SKU. It has to be unique. The next one is ungated. Some categories on Amazon require you to have prior permission to sell. For example, jewelry or automotive. There's a list of them that'll be covered in one of the modules later that will show you. It's best when you're first starting to try to avoid the categories that require you to get ungated. You have to go through an approval process and show some invoices and show some stuff. If you can, it's better to start in ones that are kind of more wide open and not gated. So to be ungated means you've gone through the process to actually get permission to sell these products on Amazon. UPC or EAN in Europe is a unique product identifier. You can get UPCs on a lot of, we'll talk about that later, but you can get them on eBay and other places. There's websites that sell these things. I don't recommend you do that. I recommend you get them on GS1, which is the official organization for buying UPCs. But they're unique product identifiers that work worldwide. So like ASIN is just for Amazon, but UPC and EAN work in retail stores. They work basically worldwide. It's a universal barcode scanning. And the last term that you need to know is VAT. This really only applies if you're selling outside the United States. We don't have VAT in the United States. We have sales tax that's added to the order. VAT. So in the U.S., if you buy something for $100 and the state has an 8% sales tax, you're actually going to pay $108 for the item. Versus if you buy something in Europe for $100, you're going to pay $100 for the item. And then depending on the country, there's going to be a 17 to 24% VAT. So it's part of that $100. So it's really, that item's only, let's say if it's a 20%, the item's only really 80. And the other 20 is going to taxes. And so it's cooked into the price in Europe and most countries, versus the US is additive with sales tax. So VAT is important because you're going to have to pay that and remit that if you're selling internationally into other countries. So these are some of the terms that you need to be aware of. There's more details down below in the PDF if you want to go into more details on these, but hopefully this has helped you with some of the jargon that you're going to hear as you continue your journey on Amazon. We'll see you in the next module.